No buzz. Just Beats Book Club. I read River Solomon's new book, Model Home. River Solomon, one of my favorite working authors by a wide margin. Book kind of fucked me up. It's very good. It's a haunted house story? Question mark. It's a haunted house story. It's a haunted house story. Haunted house story. Definitely. That follows protagonist Esri, who has relocated from her family's home, Alice, Texas, to London with their daughter, and the ending of the novel gets a text message from Nightmare Mother, capital M. Something like "I miss your screams," which sets off a chain of events that lead to Esri coming back to Texas to meet their sisters, Eve and Emmanuel. Go on to investigate the death of all three of their parents, ostensibly by suicide pact, and what history the house and its hauntings played in that and present, whether or not any of them were culpable, and when I finished this book, I was in a park, and the only reason I wasn't out and out bawling, I think, is because there was a group of like 40 dudes playing soccer, and they had just wrapped up, and they were all having a lovely like after party, like that was just starting, and so like a bunch of dope music started playing, and see them across the park, all indulging in the wonderful potluck that folks had prepared for them. It lifted my spirits just enough to not want to make me die. So I just sobbed a little bit, and then waterworks a little bit, just like tear, and then walked the rest of the way home. This is a really good book. And Model Home. I'm holding the advanced reader copy. I've liked Solomon's work pretty much straight through, and I'm blanking on my favorite of their novels, which is good. I've never read an Unkindness of Ghosts. I've started it like twice, got about 2 pages in, and then just been, I want to save this for when I really need it. But I read The Deep. It's phenomenal. Sorrowland. Sorrowland, favorite book of 2 years ago. Maybe it's 3. Who knows how time works. And I do think one of the like through lines I identified in Sorrowland that I think continued to be maybe their sort of auteur signature is, I think Solomon writes novels that are about sort of the escape from specifically Black American utopian projects. I can go into that in a second, but and I think that is a really interesting, great, wonderful, hard thing to write about. So, for instance, The Deep, right? Let's talk about The Deep very briefly. The Deep is a book about mermaids, about a mermaid society that grew out of the growing over. It grew about during the transatlantic slave trade, where many black African mothers were thrown overboard alive and the sort of imaginative impulse is, what if the children who were born underwater adapted a mermaid society? So there is this. It's not in that one. It comes up later, but like in that one, it's the sort of broadly referring to as a utopian impulse, right? Is the impulse to say that like, what if this horrible tragedy had led to something that was truly transformative and viable, right? Because this mermaid society has now existed hundreds of years, and it is exclusively born of, again, terrible, fucked up historical reality. But the society works. It is an imagination of what if the most fucked up thing that you could imagine happening happened and led to something that was good. Fucking mermaids. They're real. And they're not real like Ariel. They're real like these are the survivors of like a million different intergenerational traumas. The plot of that book is about one of those mermaids going, I am the locus of trauma for this entire community. I need to fucking leave. So, throughout Deep, throughout Sauerland, throughout Model Home, I think one of the things Solomon is working with through is the idea that I'm being too prescriptive, but a thing I have noticed as a thread throughout their work is the idea that the ability to build a perfect or idealized existence that develops out of a form of trauma is a thing that often ends up compromised. I don't get the sense that they are making a pronouncement on this in any way. I think there is a thing that is worked through over and over in very different, right? Because Deep is about mermaids. Sorrowland is about mushrooms. Model Home is about haunted house, Texas. I haven't had quite as much time to work through this one as I've had the other ones, so maybe I'll come to a different conclusion. One of the things, this is going to just be bouncing around because this book has just been bouncing around my head for literal months at this point. To bounce around, one of the things Solomon also does extremely well, and maybe more in this book than any of the others, is they are able to use the language, the contemporary language, the contemporaneous language of right now, meaning contemporary, the language of trauma that I think is hard to use in any form other than either direct interpersonal interaction or cynical Twitter interaction that directly speaks to questions of, multiply disordered folks who can't get a diagnosis, and the ways that we have enculturated to talk about trauma in the last 5 to 10 years, and and the ways to talk about the, and when I say trauma, of course, I mean personal trauma, intergenerational trauma, ancestral trauma, and interpersonal trauma, because they actually like completely talk about all of those things fairly well. That are hard to talk about in ways that aren't just simply interpersonal or deeply cynical at this point in, I think, history in 2024, because of the way that language capture happens, etc. I think they are able to write that stuff in a way that, like, fuck me, fuck me if I ever declare that I have any idea what the future holds, because what the future holds depends on what people do with it. If the future holds something from the present to a high regard, I would hope it's because the world has changed in such a way that it is a useful marker or roadmap or indication of a possible future. In the same way that, like, I haven't read it since I took a class on it, but like, I don't think Dead Souls by Gogol is a universal piece of literature. And I'm using this example for one specific reason, but I mean that extremely general. I don't think Gogol's Dead Souls is a universal piece of literature. I think it's a thing that is extremely good in the prose. And of course, I can only say that in reference to the one translation that I've ever read, etc., etc. But like, I think it can have been as beautiful as it was, and if the world shifted, if societies existed differently than they do now, then so much of its explanatory power would be. And I, again, repeat, that is true of every piece of literature. Not such a thing as a universal truth, except insofar as it is a thing that reflects sort of universality of the experience, which is not a fixed. All to say, I think that Solomon's work will absolutely stand the test of time, and I mean that both pessimistically and optimistically at the same time. Hopefully. Yeah. I want to talk about the end of this book. I've decided that's a thing that I do here on No No Buzz, a Just Bees book club. It means you're B if you're here, or you're not here. Right now, because you're not a B. The central antagonistic figure of Model Home is Nightmare Mother, as I mentioned at the top, capital N, capital M. This figure shifts a million times throughout, and one of the best parts of this book are both the fucked up descriptions of the impossibility of space inside of a space that Nightmare Mother sort of cause, and also the moments where Esri, the narrator, and Manuel, the sisters, bond together because they have had this experience together when they were children, even though they haven't been physically close with each other for like a decade or more, to maybe two, even though they kept in touch, despite very different paths in life. That sibling relationship, I think, is like genuinely extremely well told. And also, the Nightmare Mother stuff is fucked up. Nightmare Mother, what we learn mostly, woman without a face. The the text constantly sort of weaves between this idea of, I mean, on the first page, yeah, it's the first line of the book. One, maybe my mother is God, and that's why nothing I do pleases her. Maybe my mother is God, and that's why even though she's never once saved me, I keep praying that this time she will. Maybe my mother is God, and that's why when she calls, I hide. Like Shava in the garden, I am freshly aware of my shamed, but soon I'll be a failed too. My daughter is learning not to believe it. Literally how the book opens, right? Mother as God is a repeated refrain throughout the thing in a way that I actually, having reread that now, want to revisit exactly how it gets refrained, because I know it does in the sense that Nightmare Mother gets also referred to God in a way that I think just through the prose starts to conflate Mother and Nightmare Mother, even though the potential conflation is there from the beginning. I think there are moments that specifically play with expectations about that thing. The end reveals that Nightmare Mother and Mother are not the same. The house that they grew up in, house in, again, I'm pretty sure it's Dallas, is in basically it's in a gated community, like run by a homeowners association. One of the first people they meet when they go there, they are the only black family in this area. They move there because they can't afford rent in Texas, also because Ezri's mother has family nearby. I want to say either in Texas or like Tennessee nearby, something like that. And they sort of move into this gated community, and despite being, basically like left wing, probably like Black Panther associated folks, they decide that they can exist in this community and that they won't let people out, like kick them out. The first person that Ezri meets while when they move in, a woman whose name I don't remember, in the end turns out to be Nightmare Mother, who is bringing them pastries. And the story, as it unfolds throughout very many different things, right? Like, Ezri has this reputation of being like an animal killer because they, anything from they show up at home and the fish tank is broken open to the ant farm is broken open to a dead dog is nearby, and at one point they write a poem in the dead dog's blood that they turn it at school. They are interrogating whether or not they were or were not, whether they were the ghosts that haunted the house or whether they were the real ghosts. I thought there was not a real ghost. There was this woman who brought pastries and molested Ezri throughout their childhood for years. As a scheme, specifically, or as included in a scheme specifically, to run their family out of this gated community. It is a extremely intimate depiction of white supremacy, and the way that it disavows itself as it does the most fucked up things humanly imaginable that I've never quite seen put into text before. And I think this book is exceptional for its ending, which is a thing I actively don't care about in 99% of fiction. I think endings are fundamentally uninteresting. They are ways of, enclosing possibilities of the thing as it exists. Not that they're ways of, they are necessarily a way of giving you a sense of closure or whatever. That the things I am interested in are the sense of openings. Be as trite as humanly possible, right? I love M. Night Shyamalan because I don't care how a movie ends. I care about what things it points to across its particular moments. And it's more complicated than that, but that's all I need to particularly say right now, right? The way this book ends is very definitive. And there's another thing that happens after that, but the way this book ends is very definitive. But it's definitive without encapsulating everything, right? Because often when things end definitively, they end in such a way that means, and that's the end of the story. Theme, right? This ends in a way that says, and this has been happening this whole time. Open it up. Which is why I was not quite bawling in that park at the end of that soccer game, right? Because you can show me things that are very, very bad. You can tell me things that are unbelievably fucked. But when it's really, really sad is when it's opening everything else up in the world. That's Model Home. River Salmon. There's way better. And coincidentally, a fucking great writer. Thanks for not watching.